Hey everyone, welcome. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for today's explainer, where we're going to decode something that just fascinates me: the psychological differences between the rich and the poor. We're drawing on some incredible insights today, looking at core concepts from foundational wealth building books like Rich Dad Poor Dad, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and The E Myth. Our focus today is breaking down exactly how rich mindsets physically build wealth. And I promise you, by the time we finish, the way you look at your own daily decisions is going to completely change. So let's just jump right in with a question that highlights a deeply relatable paradox. Have you ever wondered why you often see highly educated people, folks with master's degrees and PhDs, struggling to get by paycheck to paycheck, while an average business owner with far less formal education just seems to absolutely thrive financially? It's a crazy contradiction, right? Well, the answer is that true wealth is actually less about the formal education you get in a classroom and almost entirely about your psychological mindset. To figure out how this works, we're going to walk through a roadmap of 5 fundamental mindset shifts. We've got 1, assets before comfort; 2, pay yourself first; 3, never stop learning; 4, buy back your time; and 5, the win-win mentality. At every step, we'll contrast the scarcity path of a poor mindset with the abundance path of a rich mindset. Let's get right to it. All right, pillar number 1, assets before comfort. This is all about the difference between actually building wealth versus just looking rich. A poor mindset usually takes a baseline salary and instantly spends it on showing off. They'll buy the newest smartphone, they'll finance a car they don't really need on a massive loan, or they'll splurge on crazy expensive designer clothes. They're buying useless things for show, leaving absolutely nothing left over to invest. The source material actually shares this perfect story about a neighborhood colony to bring this to life. There were about 6 or 7 houses, mostly belonging to highly educated professionals, retired professors, doctors, that sort of thing. Their homes were perfectly furnished, absolute pristine comfort, but they were constantly fighting over minor expenses and stressing out about money. Now, in that exact same colony, there was one incomplete, one-floor house with just a very normal car parked outside. The professors actually gossiped about this businessman neighbor, calling him stingy. But here is the catch. Skip ahead a year and a half, and that businessman had delayed his gratification to build a massive, beautifully finished 3-story mansion that completely dwarfed all the other homes. So what's the big takeaway here? Well, a wealthy mindset calculates the true long-term value a product provides before ever swiping their card. A poor mindset, they're buying comfort and show-off items first. But a rich mindset secures assets first. Things that actually generate monthly income. And then they only use the income from those assets to buy the fun, comfort stuff later. Moving on to our second pillar, pay yourself first, and the logic behind the saving sequence. You see, most people get totally trapped in this scarcity loop. The paycheck hits, they pay all their bills, they pay down their debts, and then they try to save whatever tiny amount is left over. But let's be real, mathematically and psychologically, there is rarely anything left over. Warren Buffett hit the nail on the head when he said, "Save first, spend later." You literally have to flip the sequence entirely. And that brings us to this incredible story about Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad Poor Dad, and his wife, Kim. Before they made their millions, Robert and Kim were actually drowning in debt. We're talking monthly loan payments that were literally higher than their income. No way, right? But Robert remembered this golden rule from his rich dad. So despite the massive pressure, creditors practically blowing up their phones constantly, they forced themselves to take 20% of their income and save it first. They didn't drain their savings to pay the debt. Instead, they actually used that insane pressure from the creditors as fuel to hustle, work extra hard, and just generate more income to cover those bills. And that right there brilliantly illustrates the abundance path. You kind of just have to assume your salary is 20% lower than it actually is. By enforcing that 20% rule, you guarantee your wealth building. If you follow the scarcity path and pay your bills first, you're just never going to build wealth. Saving and investing, it's the absolute, non-negotiable first step to true financial freedom. Okay, pillar number 3, never stop learning. Let's talk about skill evolution. In the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, continuous learning is called sharpening the saw. And this totally separates the middle-class urge to rest from the wealthy person's insatiable desire to grow. Just think about this for a second. Why don't you ever see TV commercials for super luxury cars? You never see a Lamborghini or a Rolls-Royce ad during the evening news, right? That's because the people who can afford them aren't sitting on the couch watching TV. A poor mindset often thinks education completely ends the second they get their degree. They come home from their job exhausted, flip on the TV, and think, "I've earned a break." But the wealthy, they are busy learning. Take Bill Gates, for example. Prime rich mentality right there. After he retired from Microsoft, he didn't just go sit on a beach somewhere. He spends his time reading massive stacks of books on vacation, running a huge global health foundation with his ex-wife Melinda, and trying to solve these incredibly complex worldwide problems. For the wealthy, continuously improving their skills isn't some huge pressure. It's a passion. It's literally what brings them joy and relaxation. So you can see how this builds, right? The middle-class exhaustion with learning completely caps their earning potential. They just stay totally predictable in their job and their salary. But a rich mindset's lifelong dedication to picking up new, valuable skills means their ability to generate wealth is constantly evolving and expanding. Which brings us to pillar number 4, buy back your time and the logic of outsourcing. This shift is where we stop hoarding pennies and start leveraging the absolute most valuable resource any of us have, 24 hours. That's the whole shebang. That's all we get. The wealthy are hyper-aware that they only have 24 hours in a day and a very strict, limited amount of daily willpower. A scarcity mindset obsesses over saving tiny amounts of money, figuring out how to shave $3 off the electricity bill or spending hours doing every single chore around the house. But a rich mindset? They absolutely refuse to waste their limited willpower on trivial tasks. So I really have to ask you, are you guarding your pennies at the expense of your hours? A rich mindset literally buys back time by outsourcing things like cooking, driving, or administrative office work. Someone with a poor mindset looks at that and gets totally jealous, thinking, oh, they're just being flashy. But it's not about looking cool. It's about freeing up your time so you can focus exclusively on rare, high-value skills that aggressively scale your wealth. Plus, outsourcing pumps money right back into the economy and creates jobs for other people. It's just highly strategic. All right, let's dive into our 5th and final pillar, the win-win mentality, and the economics of collaboration. This principle is wild because it proves that your emotional intelligence literally, physically builds your wealth. To explain exactly how, the source material breaks down this truly fascinating psychological experiment. So researchers take 2 total strangers and put a $100 bill on a table. Person A gets to propose how to split the money, but person B holds all the power to either accept the deal, in which case they both walk away with cash, or reject the deal, meaning the money vanishes and nobody gets a dime. Now, when you look at the data, something super interesting happens. When person A offered a fair 50-50 split, person B happily accepted. Awesome. When person A got a little bit greedy and offered 60-40, keeping 60 for themselves, person B still accepted. Free money is free money, right? But researchers found this distinct tipping point in human psychology right at 70-30. When person A offered to keep $70 and give person B 30, person B almost always rejected the deal. I mean, think about how totally illogical that is. Person B is voluntarily choosing to walk away with $0 just to punish person A out of pure jealousy for getting a bigger slice of the pie. And this brilliantly illustrates our final point today. A poor mindset is driven by jealousy, competition, and ultimately, they'll choose a lose-lose scenario just to spite someone else. But a wealthy person in that exact same experiment, they would happily take the $30, even if it's a way smaller percentage of the deal. Why? Because they know they have the talent to take that $30 and create thousands of more opportunities with it. They refuse to let ego or jealousy blind them to free money. They believe in collaboration, and they are always looking for a win-win. So let's do a really quick rapid-fire recap of the 5 crucial mindset shifts we've decoded today for building real wealth. 1. Secure your income-generating assets before you buy your comforts. 2. Pay yourself first by saving 20% of your income, totally non-negotiably. 3. Treat learning as a lifelong passion, not some chore. 4. Aggressively outsource to buy back your time for high-value tasks. And 5. Always think win-win and dodge that toxic trap of jealousy. Which brings us to our final thought to wrap up this explainer. I want you to take a hard look at your daily habits, your recent purchases, and even how you react to other people's success. Ask yourself, which mindset is guiding your money today? Are you walking the scarcity path or the abundance path? I highly encourage you to audit your own life using these 5 pillars and just keep exploring these concepts. The transition from a poor mindset to a rich one doesn't happen overnight, for sure, but it absolutely starts with a single decision. Thank you so much for hanging out with me to decode the wealth mindset, and I'll catch you next time.